Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. We're going to get into 4 interesting plants this week. Well, I guess before I do, I should point out the obvious. I live in the mountains of North Carolina, and we just had a horrible hurricane, very much like Katrina in '04. And I cannot remember the name of the storm that came in like right on the heels of Katrina, but like Katrina came in and flooded everything out right after it left New Orleans, then like stopped over us. Thank goodness this one didn't stop over us. It moved quickly. Anyway, flooded everything out, washed out the roads, killed a lot of people, took out the power. And then like a week later, another one came through, a tropical storm. And unfortunately, there's another tropical storm forming in the Gulf right now. So we may be actually reliving the flood of 2004. However, apparently this one is a lot worse in a lot of places. So I'm doing okay. I'm on higher ground. I'm on a slope. It's people really in the valleys and hollers, those like really deep, steep valleys. We call them hollers around here. It's bad. I got a friend over in Watauga County, and she's been reporting in. And, most people know Boone, North Carolina. They got some really bad flooding, and it's an issue, but it's the little valley towns around there, like Sugar Grove and Meat Cap and Deep Gap. Houses just washed away, and she's saying a lot of people are missing. So, y'all, we could use some prayers for Western North Carolina and everybody affected by this storm. So far, the tally of those who've died is in the 60s. Probably going to go a lot higher. All the roads are closed right now. The roads are seriously washed out in many places. You can't get from town to town or up the mountain from down the mountain. The road in front of my house is completely closed. This is why when I tell people it's not crazy to be a prepper. I've got 3-4 sources for water, clean drinking water, even if the power's out. I've got ways to do things. I've got stored food. You never know when something like this is going to happen. Georgia got hit hard, parts of South Carolina, but they said back in 2004 that was a 1 in 100 year flood because we hadn't had flooding like that since 1916. Well, it's just 20 years later, and we got it worse. So I know, there's this like popular mindset out there that preppers are like, crazy people who have militias and hide in the woods. No, you need to be prepared. You need to have cash on hand because right now the ATMs are all down. You can't go get money, okay? You need to have food stored. You need to have either water stored or ways to get fresh water, fresh, clean drinking water. You need to have backup power sources. There are a lot of things, and people say they'll just rely on their cell phones. Well, most of the cell towers are down in Western North Carolina right now. If you don't have a landline, you're not calling in or out. And that's one of the reasons so we don't know where so many people are. They can't communicate with each other. So the roads are going to have to be fixed first, which means major crews coming in, because I'm talking sections of road that of 20, 30 yards just washed out and gone just about everywhere. Rock slides, piles of mud and rocks on top of roads. So the crews are going to have to come out before they can get power on to most places. Fortunately, I've got a little power station just up from my house, so power is nowhere near as much as an issue as it used to be for me. It used to be the power would go out just about every time we had a thunderstorm. Now it's a little more reliable, and that's a good thing. I'm very, very grateful for that. But take this stuff seriously. Don't be one of those people, standing on their roofs. You remember the scenes from Hurricane Katrina down in New Orleans, where people on their roofs waiting to be rescued. Don't be one of those people. If you're not in an area of high ground, you do need to evacuate. And when you're thinking about where you're going to buy property, be very aware of slope. Slope and aspect are the two main things when you're looking at property. Make sure if you get a foot of rain in a 24-hour period and 50-mile-per-hour winds, that you're not going to be washed away. So on that rather somber note, let's get on to this week's show. And we will start, as usual, with our edible wild plants. I'm going to do two edibles and two medicinals this week. I'll probably try to keep this one short this week. It's to say the least, there's been a lot of stress. I always say I don't get stressed. I don't get anxious, but when you go through floodings and hurricanes and all kinds of stuff, you do get tired. You do get very tired. So we'll start with a plant called hyssop. Now, hyssop is different depending on what country you're in. Our hyssop is actually hedgenettle. The hyssop in our country is in the Stachys family and is related to mint. And in fact, it really looks like a tall, upright mint, and the leaves have no minty flavor. Okay, I got a patch of it growing just up the road from my house. That's probably now washed downstream in somewhere in Morganton. It hit me earlier, and I don't mean to make light of it. Such a serious problem. I mean, people. Okay, they're having trouble getting trucks up the mountain to bring food to grocery stores and restaurants. I mean, it's not just a matter of if they don't get these roads fixed soon, there are going to be people starving. Seriously, it is very serious. But I love to fish up here, and the state, and I think to some extent the feds do as well. But the state on the Blue Ridge Parkway, that's actually federal territory, as are the national forests. But so I guess it's a partnership between the states and the federal government. They stock all the streams and rivers with trout, and the fishing's fantastic. And now the fishing's probably going to be really good next year down in Hickory and Lenoir and Morganton and anywhere down the mountain, because all of our fish just got washed down the mountain. Yeah, y'all got that to look forward to at least. I know Hickory got hit really hard. And so did Lenoir and more. Anything at the foot of the mountain is going to get all the water that runs down the mountain. That's why the roads going up and down are in such horrible shape right now. 2 interstates are closed. It's pretty serious. So I don't want to make light of it in any way, but yeah, I'm probably going to have a real lousy time fishing up here next year. And it's done for the season. The fish are gone. They've been washed literally away. And a lot of the creeks and rivers have probably changed course. All the maps are going to have to be redone. That's what happened in '04. All the rivers changed course. And you never know what you're going to find in those rivers either. Bodies, bones. This is serious stuff. So anyway, we will talk about hyssop or hedgenettle. As I said, it is like a tall mint that doesn't smell of mint. However, it is edible, and it's actually a very good edible. The tuberous root. This is what's nice about it. I always say identify your tuberous root plants first. Whether it's Jerusalem artichoke or a daylily or Oh gosh, there's several we've talked about. Nutgrass, evening primrose. This is one you want to put in that category. All mints are non-toxic, right? This is probably the only mint I know of that does have a tuberous root, and it's very much like Jerusalem artichoke. In fact, it has a somewhat sweet flavor when when you eat it, especially raw. I think it's particularly pronounced. That's inulin. And inulin is a type of sugar that doesn't spike the blood sugar, so it can be a very good choice for diabetics. However, every tuber that has inulin in it, uh, there's sort of a learning process. The gut has to learn to break it down. It can give you some really painful gas. So you need to eat a little at a time until your body gets used to it. And especially really good to have kefir or kombucha, a probiotic of some sort, sauerkraut, whatever, to help get that gut bacteria to develop those enzymes to break down that inulin. And really, for that reason, one of the ways that I like this plant is pickled. Take those tubers and pickle them. You can eat them raw, you can eat them blanched. They're real nice in a salad. The texture is sort of like water chestnuts. And I like water chestnuts. I like water chestnuts a lot, actually. And by the way, speaking of water and water chestnuts and all that, you can grow tons of water chestnuts in a very small space. If you just had like a little kiddie pool or a koi pond, something, a little ornamental thing of water on your property, it's actually I think it may be the most productive plant per square footage that there is. So you think about that in the spring, water chestnuts in a can are fine, throw them in some Chinese food or something. Think about what you could do with them if you had like a bushel of them coming in every couple of weeks, right? I mean, you could be eating water chestnuts like crazy and canning them and storing them. And they have, starches and such, a really good source of calories. I would put water chestnuts in the survival food category because they're going to give you a lot of calories. They're calorie dense, let's just put it that way, and good fiber. It's always important in times of stress. People don't drink enough water; they get constipated. That's just human nature. The brain will actually turn off the signals that tell the body to drink water. That's part of our survival instincts. Back when you won't know you're thirsty, in other words, back when our ancestors could be, attacked by barbarians or fire, or they go through a hurricane or something, or animals, and they had to, lions were after them or something, and they had to run or hide for a long time. Part of our fight or flight stress response is sometimes dry mouth, but definitely the body reduces the signals, the brain reduces the signals that would tell you that you're either hungry or thirsty. Your focus is, I got to get out of this situation and survive it, not I need to stop and find some water somewhere or eat a burger. It is one of the really interesting aspects of our minds, and just fascinating to me, actually. So, all right, let's talk about one of my favorite ways to use this. I've already told, like I said, pickled's really good. Raw in a salad is just fine. I like to use them in a layered salad. And you could use a lot of different things like this. I think the original recipe I know it is. My mom used to make this, and she used water chestnuts. So when I found the hedgenettle roots, I thought this would be perfect, and it is. You just want to blanch them. So what does blanch mean? Well, it means you trim them up, scrub them down, and lightly cook them in boiling water. No more than a minute to 3, right? Depending on the size. So you're going to have 1 to 2 cups of blanched hedgenettle roots, and/or canned water chestnuts. The combination is actually better than either one of them by themselves. I'm actually going to recommend using both on this one. 2 cups of chopped lettuce or a mix of lettuce and wild greens. Absolutely, you can combine lettuce with spinach or any wild greens you like. Bitter peppery greens such as dandelion greens, such as a wild mustard. Just nothing too tough. We're going to look for more of our tender greens in this. Add about 1 cup of sweet peas, sweet garden peas. That's, I grow peas, freeze what I don't use. But one thing about sweet garden peas, if you're not growing them in the garden, they're not coming in fresh, and you haven't frozen them yourself, never hesitate to buy sweet peas frozen from the grocery store. They're actually, what they do is they take the pods, and they may not be the first spring peas that get used, but what they'll do is open them up and put the peas in water. And the more mature ones, if I remember correctly, the more mature ones sink, and the smaller, sweeter ones float. So all the small sweet ones go into to be frozen, and they usually have, well, they have a far better flavor than anything in a can or dried. The older ones go into can or be used for split pea soup. Always keep a couple of bags of frozen peas on hand, and I'll just get them from the grocery store. I mean, that's, there's no shame in that whatsoever. So one of the best things you can actually buy in the grocery store. About a 1/2 cup of chopped onion or other allium, maybe some ramps, whatever you like, wild garlic. 1/2 cup mayonnaise or more, depending on taste. And if it's homemade, I will use more. I've told you before how I make mayonnaise. It's super simple, super easy, and so much better than anything in a jar. But it's again up to you. 1/2 cup grated cheese of your choice. Parm is fantastic. Parmesan is fantastic, but grated cheddar will do just as fine. Grated Swiss is fantastic. It can be a mix of cheeses, about a 1/4 cup of herbs, whatever you like. I'm going to use whatever is fresh. And, this hedgenettle or hyssop, as it's improperly called, being in the mint family, I think a little mint in there is perfectly wonderful. And some other members of the mint family like basil. Basil is really nice. Definitely parsley. I put parsley in anything, but it could be wild herbs, flavorful, aromatic, wild culinary herbs, or whatever you got on hand in your spice rack. About a 1/4 cup of chopped pecans. That's what I normally use, but any other nut will be fine. And because all I want is about a 1/4 cup on this, I will use and do harder to shell nuts, such as black walnut or hickory nut. You'll spend an hour trying to crack those things and dig the nut meats out, and you might come up with a 1/4 cup of nut meats. So this is a real nice way to use them. It features them. I'll use them in a salad like this, or hold them back and do like a substitute them for almonds, slice almonds, and like a trout almondine. Really nice way to feature those nuts. You don't want to. Another great way. Ice cream, black walnut ice cream. Oh, that's so good. But you want to taste those nuts and let them be a star, because you put so much work in that. You don't want to overcook them. You don't want to let them go too long. Nice and pralines, if you would do that. But I wouldn't combine them with anything that's going to dominate the flavor. Probably one exception, and it would also be some of these same herbs, would be a pesto. I think black walnut or hickory nuts are fantastic in a pesto. There's something about that basil that really brings out that flavor, the basil and the cheese. So that's why I'm really thinking, it goes well with this salad, really. And then salt and pepper to taste, right? So let's just lightly salt and pepper between the layers, okay? And in a casserole dish, put a layer of chopped lettuce, etc., other greens, whatever you're using. A layer of hedgenettle and or water chestnut. A layer of onions and peas. Cover with mayonnaise. Add the herbs, nuts and cheese on top. Cover up and refrigerate for at least an hour. Overnight's better, but it never makes it that long. If I can wait an hour to eat that, it's really one of my favorite salads. And as a kid, this was like one of my favorite things to eat. It was one of the things my mother would take to a family reunion, and I'd make sure I got to it before anybody else so I could get a nice big serving. And it's really, really good. Such simple ingredients, but they come together so well. Now, I actually had a request for the next one, and very brief on this one. It's Japanese knotweed. Now, Japanese knotweed is one of the most pervasive and troublesome weeds in America. If you see Japanese knotweed growing on somebody's property, they will probably pay you to harvest it. Really, you can harvest all you want of this one. Most people want it eradicated. it is very troublesome, especially to farmers. So you do want to make sure if it is in a farmer's field and you're going to harvest it, well, first ask permission, but make sure it hasn't been sprayed with pesticides. So it's in the buckwheat family, and the seeds are edible. They're a little smaller than regular buckwheat, but you could, in a survival situation, you might actually want to propagate Japanese knotweed because it grows so abundantly, and you could harvest the seeds and use them as a grain. They can be milled for bread or just thrown in with flour to enrich a bread or something. But mainly, the main value of this plant is the stems. Young tender stems can be cooked just like asparagus. Older, tougher skins can be peeled and used as you might use rhubarb. It's in the same family as rhubarb as well, so you can make pies out of this. It has a nice kind of sour sweetness. It's going to probably become one of your favorite wild edibles, actually, and the abundance of it means that you can find it just about anywhere. So if you're going to use the older stems, you peel them, okay? Cook them down. You can cook them down in a jam or make a pie. You're going to want to add sugar and lemon juice to that, or either way, And I find it to be a very interesting addition to the wild diet. But the young tender stems are really easy and easy to prepare, really enjoyable. Like I said, you cook them just like asparagus, and I mean, it's a valuable herb from a food-wise perspective. People shouldn't be trying to eradicate it because it's coming in that time in the spring before anything's really being produced by the garden, what they used to call the hungry gap. So, I mean, this is one that would keep people from starving in the spring or keep them from getting scurvy. It's got a lot of vitamin C in it. The trick is just to pick it before it gets too tough, and that means maybe before I wouldn't let it go more than a foot tall before harvested. Like I said, related to rhubarb, it does have a nice sourness to it, sour sweet. I enhance that usually with some lemon juice or zest. And it's really good just using the steam sauteed method, just as we do with asparagus. And I'll just say it again. You put it in the pan with a little bit of olive oil or butter and a little bit of water and salt. Put the lid on, bring it up to a simmer, uncover it. It steams. And when the water's out, it starts to kind of fry and saute in the oil. And I mean, that's the easiest way to do just about any vegetable. And it's what I normally do. I don't like mushy boiled vegetables. And then just, serve with some butter. If it's a little tougher, peel it, chop it. Do the same thing, usually. But definitely better pickled, I meant to say. Really good pickled. And we've talked many times about pickling. I guess the recipes are in my Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. But you can do a vinegar pickle where you combine vinegar, a little bit of water, salt, all kinds of spices, whatever you like in there, black peppercorn, coriander, dill, or you can go with a sweet pickle, using sugar, whatever you want to do. Or you can do a natural fermented pickle where you're just doing saltwater brine, a little kombucha to start it, really quite good. But it also, because it is in the rhubarb family, you can use it in desserts. Japanese knotweed is really good combined with strawberries, like you would do a strawberry rhubarb pie. Makes a great jam. I'm not a great pie dough maker, pie shell maker, and I'm not a big guy on sweets, but I do really enjoy this pie and absolutely worth the effort. You take equal parts peeled and chopped knotweed, chopped strawberries and sugar, cook them down. Like I said, a little lemon zest, perfect, or a little lemon juice, perfect. Both is better. And just kind of taste it till you find the right balance, and then make a pie out of it. Or use it as preserves, eat it with a biscuit. It's really pretty good. And actually, you'll find some recipes for knotweed and strawberry pie online. And they're probably more professional bakers than I am, so I definitely think you should look that one up. But it's got a nice sourness. I find it very refreshing, especially after a heavy meal. Very refreshing as a side dish, though. Just like I said, cooked like asparagus with a nice piece of beef or a pork chop. Really good. Good pork chop. Yeah, definitely on that. So now we'll get to our medicinal plants, and we're going to start with one that you've probably seen many times, Johnsongrass. Everybody has probably encountered Johnson grass at some point in their life, but what you may not know about it is it's a member of the sorghum family. It's officially Sorghum howlepens, and this one's also a wild edible. It's one of the plants that produces wild rice, but it does have some medicinal use. Now, frankly, I love wild rice, so when I spot Johnson grass, I make a note of it so I can go back and harvest the seeds. I don't use it much as medicinal, but it does have some some medicinal use. Plants for Future says the seed is demulcent and diuretic. The edible parts of Johnson grass are the seed, raw or cooked, and can be used in a similar manner to rice, or it can be ground into a flour and used as a cereal and bread making cakes. Botany in a Day warns that plants stressed by weather, though, might contain cyanide. So if you've been through severe drought conditions, you might want to hesitate on harvesting your Johnson grass. But again, it's one of those that people consider weeds, and I consider it a rather useful plant. So, but I've got a longer entry here on Stachys floridiana. Now, we just recently, of course, been talking about Stachys. Well, this is one that often goes by the name Florida betony, Florida hedgenettle, or rattlesnake weed. So you see this is very similar to one of the edible plants we just talked about. It's not, however, true betony. Now, just as I said, people call hedgenettle hyssop. People call Stachys floridiana Florida betony or Florida hedgenettle. Makes things very confusing. To further compound the confusion, it's also one of the many plants called rattlesnake weed. So we want to be sure of our identification on this. That said, it is in that Stachys family, so I'm going to give you more broad, general information, medicinal information about Stachys, including the European version of Stachys. They appear to be basically very similar plants, cousins. I think they could probably be used interchangeably, but I can't tell you that because I don't have documentation of that. It's just one we're going to have to experiment with. It's been used a lot in European herbal medicine, and St. Hildegard von Bingen had sort of a uniquely, I would guess, spiritual view of this herb. You know, she's probably one of the greatest herbalists of all time, and she's a doctor of the Catholic Church and a mystic, and she was taught about herbal medicine by what she called the voice of the living light and angels and such as that. So you may take this one with a grain of salt. It's going to sound very strange to modern ears, but she recommended it as to be used against love potions and spells. Well, you may say, wait a minute, this is superstition and all that. There are actually some herbs that have been used traditionally for this purpose. Now, it's not superstition. If you go back to the ancient writings and you look at okay. Well, Cupid's a good example. Everybody thinks of Cupid as the little baby with wings shooting love arrows at people. The Latin word I think was cupiditas. That's what he's named for. It didn't necessarily mean love as much as it did obsession. There are herbs that have been used by people with bad intent. A lot of them would have been considered witches in times past, or voodoo. It was very popular in voodoo, and actually, in several Native American tribes, the Lumbee actually have an herb that is used in this way. Somewhat of we might say, a hypnotic type herb. An herb is going to affect the emotions and psychology that will make people submissive. And, going so far as like in voodoo to turn people into zombies and such. Well, there are herbs that will make people put on almost a catatonic state and make them do whatever they're told. And of course, they're like date rape drugs and such. Well, there are actually date rape herbs that have been used for a very long time. Okay, some are to that extreme. Some just kind of make people more open to like hypnotic suggestion. Nobody really knows how a lot of these herbs work, but among people who would call themselves witches and have a malevolent intent, of course, I never endorse witchcraft. I've written pretty extensively against witchcraft, but not all witches are out to hurt people. Some are, and those that are would use something like Well, we've talked about just recently the solanums, the mandrake and the belladonna and such to alter people's psyches, to make them have visions, and in that state, they can be very highly suggestible. And that's just one example. The solanums can be used that way. There are actually many. There are many herbs that can have that can be used for bad intents and purposes. I usually try not to say much about such herbs except as a warning. You know. So anyway, understanding all that in context, and understanding this was written in like 1080. This is really old. Okay. She said, "For one who is foolish or silly or lacks knowledge, betony, this is Stachys, should be crushed to a juice and placed over his entire chest at night. It should be tied on with a cloth in the morning. If this is done often, he will return to his senses." Well, that's pretty nice. I mean, we could put a lot of psychiatrists out of business if we knew how to do it that way. But then she says, "If someone is regularly tormented by false dreams, he should have betony leaves with him when he goes to bed, and he will see fewer of those false dreams." Okay? Again, you may think that's far out. There are several herbs that can either cause nightmares or help prevent them, and it just has to do with their effect upon the brain and hormones. Yeah, there really are. A lot of people can't take valerian because it gives them nightmares. Some people can't take ashwagandha because it gives them nightmares. Some people who have nightmares, or night terrors, and other issues, usually having to do with trauma or stress, there are several herbs that can help prevent that. We've talked about them before. Mugwort, pasque-flower, anemone, but a toxic plant that should be used very in small amounts. She's saying that betony, probably the scent of it, and lavender would be along the same lines. Lavender can help give you better, more peaceful dreams, peaceful nights sleep because of its aromatic qualities. Well, we just talked about how these are somewhat in the mint family, and well, this is Botanica officinalis, so that is a different plant, but they do have some aromatic qualities to them, especially the Botanica officinalis as opposed to the hedgenettle, which we talked about earlier. But she says, "A woman who suffers inordinately with great menstruation at the wrong time should place betony in wine so that its flavor passes into the wine, and she should drink this often and she would be cured." So a very practical use for it there. Even more practical was Brother Aloysius in the German folk medicine tradition, who said that of Botanica officinalis, that's betony official, leaves are used for epilepsy, chest complaints, and blood spitting. Roots are emetic and purgative. The whole plant is used for worms, sprained limbs, poor appetite, fever, dizziness, brain disorders, blockages of the liver and spleen, trembling, paralysis, gout, severe headaches, jaundice, gravel, cancerous sores, and sores on the head. So he had a lot of really practical uses for it. Getting up a little more modern, 1930s, Miss Grieve says that there are 5 varieties of Stachys growing in England, and she mentions many of them. She was unaware of the Florida Stachys, that is, kind of considered a widespread weed throughout much of the United States. But she talks about it has a long history of herbal use and was once considered a panacea for all ills. She quotes a lot of historical stuff, and I'm not going to get into it a lot. In ancient Greece, they used it for driving away devils and despair. So, we kind of get some of those similar ideas from St. Hildegard. She quotes one saying, "It is good for a man's soul or his body. It shields him against visions and dreams, and is very wholesome. And thus thou shalt gather it in the month of August." Okay. She says there are many extravagant superstitions about betony, and one that's really was common in the ancient world was if you planted a ring of betony, and if there were 2 snakes inside of it, they would fight and kill each other. And people would actually plant betony around their homes and such, or their camps or whatever, to help keep snakes out. So whether that works or not, I have no idea. Never tried it that way. I'm not going to say one way or another. But let's get into official use, medicinal use. She said whole herb, it was useful, collected in July. She thought it was best in July. And she talks about gathering on a nice clear day in the morning, but after the dew's been dried by the sun. So that's always essential for aromatic plants. Dry the leaves carefully and quickly and store them away. Medicinal use and actions. She says, betony was once the sovereign remedy for all maladies of the head, and its properties as a nervine and tonic are still acknowledged, though it is more frequently employed in combination with other nervines than alone. It is useful in hysteria, palpitations, pain in the head and face, neuralgia, and all nervous affections. The Medicina Britannica of 1666 states, I have known the most obstinate headaches cured by the daily breakfasting for a month or 6 weeks on a decoction of betony made with new milk and strained. So betony actually simmered in milk, or steeped. I guess it would be steeped in hot milk. No, she said decoction, so it would be simmered. She says it's an aromatic. It has astringent and alterative action, and combined with other remedies is used as a tonic in dyspepsia, that's like stomach upset, and rheumatism, scrofula, and impurities of the blood. Scrofula, swollen glands. Weak infusion forms an acceptable substitute for tea. Yes, betony is actually a popular tea substitute, an herbal tea, but you don't want it too strong. You know, you're not taking a medicinal dose. And also, the dried herb was often smoked, combined with eyebright or coltsfoot to relieve a headache. And it was also used as a tobacco substitute at some points. A powder of the herb will provoke violent sneezing if sniffed up the nose. So don't sniff it up your nose unless you want that. In fact, it was actually combined with dried tobacco in Rowley's British herb snuff and was snuffed up the nose to make you sneeze, which they said would help prevent headaches. Maybe it did. I doubt it. I have no idea. Frankly, I've never liked anything going up my nose. Maybe I'm weird that way, but I could never be a cocaine addict or something. I can't stand any amphetamine. I had to take a lot of asthma medications when I was a kid. Actually damaged my heart a little bit. Anything stronger than a coffee, caffeine in a coffee, will give me a terrible headache and make me very irritable and miserable. And so, no danger there for me. So, but anyway, I don't like anything sniffed up my nose. I don't even like using nasal washes. She quotes Gerard saying that it preserveth the lives and bodies of men from danger of epidemical disease. It helpeth those who loathe and cannot digest their food, and is used either green or dry, the root or the herb. The flowers drunk in a broth of meat or made into a conserve syrup using water and sugar. He proceeds to say that the herb cures jaundice, falling sickness, which is a type of epilepsy, palsy, convulsions, gout, dropsy, and head troubles, and that the powder mixed with honey is no less available for all sorts of colds or cough, wheezing, shortness of breath, and consumption, and that a concoction made with mead and pennyroyal is good for putrid agues. I don't know what a putrid ague means. Fever. I'm not sure what a putrid ague would be. And in wine, as good as a vermifuge, helps get rid of intestinal parasites. Also removing obstructions of the spleen and liver. He recommended a decoction of wine gargled for any sores or soreness in the mouth or throat, for toothaches. He said it was a cure for the bite of a mad dog. I would not try it for that purpose. If you think you've been bitten by a rabid animal, you're best to go to the hospital. But if you couldn't, and that's all you had, I guess it would be worth a shot. He said the powder of the leaves taken with a little honey and vinegar is good for refreshing those that are wearied for travel. It stayeth bleeding in the nose and mouth, and helpeth those that spit blood. Good for those who are ruptured or bruised. Green herb or the juice applied to an inward hurt or an outward wound will quickly heal it up and close it. It will draw forth any broken bone or splinter, thorn or other thing gotten into the flesh. Also healeth all old sores, ulcers, and boils. The root is displeasing both to the taste and the stomach, whereas the flowers and leaves, by their sweet and spicy taste, comfort both in meat and medicine. So it was a popular culinary and medicinal herb. just the flowers and leaves, though. Um, Cloverleaf Farm's Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicines cautions do not take it in pregnancy. It's always true. Anything that says it has vermifugal properties can cause a miscarriage and probably a lot of damage to the mother as well. So you always want to stay away from that. They talk specifically of the European ones, but they say it can be found in Asia, the Caucasus, grows all over the place. As I said, I don't know if the Stachys floridiana is interchangeable. I have not been able to find any information on that, but it's definitely worth looking into and experimenting with. And if you need to, order some of the European variety. I think Strictly Medicinal Seeds has it. In fact, I'm pretty sure they do. I'm sure a lot of sellers do, and grow it in your garden. And that would be really good to kind of compare the wild plant to the cultivated plant and see, really how they measure up to each other. But they said it's astringent, aids digestion, mildly sedating, a muscle relaxant, pain reliever, stops bleeding, tonic, uterine stimulant. Traditional uses: betony still used for headache and pain and facial pain remedy. Plant is mildly sedative, used to relieve nervous stress and tension. Infusion taken daily as relaxing tonic. It's mildly bitter, good to stimulate the digestion, help stop bleeding, good to combine with yarrow to be even more effective. Fresh leaves boiled can be used for cuts, sores, skin ulcers, wounds, and swelling. Is effective remedy for a number of conditions, including asthma, bronchitis, heartburn, bladder and kidney problems, and intestinal worm infestations. So there you have it, y'all. Definitely worth growing some and learning to identify them in the wild. As they said, there are 5 varieties of Stachys just in England alone. They were used interchangeably. And apparently they were interchangeable with the ones in Asia. I feel pretty confident that Stachys floridiana would have similar properties. But until I actually try the 2 herbs side by side, I will not know for sure. And since Stachys floridiana doesn't really like the cold mountains where I live, I'll have to wait and find this one when I'm able to drive off the mountain again, which may be some time, unfortunately. But, God willing, by next spring I can go find some of this one. Anyway, I do have, as I said, if it comes back and wasn't completely washed away, the Hedgenettle growing in up the hill from me, and I found it not aromatic at all, as the description said, so it would not be used interchangeably, but a very good edible food in the roots. So y'all, stay safe. Pray for the people in Western North Carolina and everyone else that was hit by the storm, and hang in there. And I'll talk to you next time. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.